this evening, and this time the Americans weren't the only ones attacking. Royal Air Force Tornadoes went into action for the first time with their laser-guided bombs. All the planes involved in the first of the RAF sorties were said to have returned safely to base in Kuwait. Tonight's raids aimed at President Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction are reported to have been even heavier than last night's, when 200 cruise missiles were fired. The Iraqis are claiming heavy civilian casualties, at least 25 dead, although Tony Blair told the Commons today that every possible care was being taken to avoid them. Our Middle East correspondent Julian Mannion is in Baghdad. Like other Western journalists, he's subject to restrictions on where he can go. But here's his report on what he's seen today.
Suddenly, the air campaign has struck in the heart of Baghdad. First one, then a second cruise missile slammed into a target in plain view from the Ministry of Information. There's just been a second flash and then a second boom from what appears to have been another cruise missile impact just on the other side of that apartment building over there. And as far as we know, that is the site of a security force headquarters, the sort of place that is certainly very high on the target list of these Allied air attacks against Baghdad. As the booming explosions sounded across the city, the Iraqi anti-aircraft fire was intense but apparently ineffective. Once again, the gunners tried to follow the missiles by sound, blasting sharp bursts of fire into the night whenever they heard engine noise. But the missiles kept coming, and one impact knocked our cameraman off his feet. This was a spectacular display of precision firepower near the heart of a heavily populated city. But the Iraqis say civilians have been killed and wounded. They took us to a hospital where casualties from the air attacks are being treated. We saw perhaps 20 injured people. One doctor claimed that 40 had been killed. Another said that he'd seen just 2 bodies. We were told that this little girl was hurt when a missile hit an outlying district of Baghdad. Others appear to have been injured when a missile hit a government communications complex.
They are in critical condition. And I just want to ask Mr. Clinton and the American administration, why are they doing all this to our people?
In daylight, damage the Iraqis say was caused by a cruise missile. Iraq's Minister of Commerce escorted journalists to what he said was a seed warehouse in President Saddam Hussein's hometown, Tikrit.
The Minister of Trade has in this warehouse 2,600 tons of rice related to the Oil for Food program.
The truth of these claims is impossible to verify. The fact is that the Iraqis have shown journalists only a handful of the dozens, perhaps hundreds of places that have been hit. Those not shown include palaces, security service headquarters, a car battery factory that may have been making something else, and the house of one of Saddam Hussein's daughters. No one was in at the time. What seems clear is that this has been a carefully planned operation designed to keep civilian casualties to a minimum. What is less clear is what impact it will have on the Iraqi leadership and on the future of the country. Julian Mannion, News at 10, Baghdad.
I spoke to Julian Mannion a few minutes ago, and I asked him first for the latest news from Baghdad tonight.
At the moment it's quiet, but just a few moments ago we heard once again the warbling sound of the sirens. This is the warning siren, for what it's worth, because the Iraqi system has not been altogether reliable in predicting when these cruise missile and aircraft attacks were going to take place. But it went off, and right now we're waiting to see if anything further is going to happen. Earlier, as you've seen, there was really a spectacular display of firepower. There were booming explosions close to this building, literally shaking it. Just one of them went off just behind that apartment building, which you can't see in this frame, just over there. And then another one followed. And really, it was quite an awesome sight. It was something that really even the hardened Iraqis who've been through all this before were quite awed by.
Any news about movements of President Saddam Hussein today?
Well, there is an official version about this. Iraqi television news came out tonight and declared that President Saddam Hussein has been to some of the sites that have been damaged by these missile and aircraft attacks. And the announcer for it was an announcer saying this, just an announcer to camera, said that he had been to military bases that were damaged. An interesting statement and concession that in itself. There was just an announcer, no pictures whatsoever, all the way through this quite lengthy piece of script describing all this, leading to speculation as to whether this is the result of the damage that some people say has been inflicted on Iraqi television and its facilities, or whether it's purely for security reasons in order not to give away anything at all, any real information about the president's movements. Because, of course, as far as the Iraqi government and leadership are concerned, the number one priority at the moment is the protection of Saddam Hussein.
Julian Mannion, thank you. As we heard from Julian Mannion, Baghdad is quiet at the moment, but at its height, the bombardment tonight was intense. Our foreign news correspondent Paul Davis has been taking a closer look at those dramatic pictures that were beamed live around the world.
The Iraqi authorities sounded their air raid warnings and sent thousands of rounds into the skies over their capital. But in reality, they could do little to prevent this American-led attack inflicting further damage. And some of it, this time, on targets near the center of Baghdad. Cruise missiles guided through the gunfire into the heart of Saddam Hussein's capital. In front of the world's television cameras, American missiles hit several buildings. Correspondents in Baghdad giving immediate confirmation that this assault was bigger and more concentrated than the previous night's attack.
And we are doing our best to report what we're able to see here. And, whoa! There was a very, very large explosion.
That sounded close.
Witnesses said some of the explosions appeared to be in the area of a military-industrial complex, though it was impossible to confirm either the target or any casualties suffered. Viewers of this Gulf television station watched Iraqi gunners attempting to intercept the cruise missiles and apparently failing. The main attack lasted just half an hour. For any assessment of its effectiveness, we will have to wait until the morning. Paul Davis, News at 10.
In the Commons today, MPs' thoughts were very much with the RAF Tornado crews and their families. The Tornado's home base is in Lossiemouth, but the crews have been in Kuwait for some time, preparing for the action which finally came today. Our defence correspondent Kevin Dunn reports.
8 of the 12 tornadoes based in Kuwait are believed to have taken part in today's strike. Armed with laser-guided precision paveway bombs, they left the base shortly after sunset to fly the 35 miles into Iraqi airspace. The aircraft normally operate in pairs at 20,000 feet, one tornado locating and marking the target with a laser beam, down which the second aircraft sends its 1,000-pound bombs. Before they left, the mood in 12 Squadron was relaxed.
As military men, we will continue to carry out military operations as tasked by our governments until such point they say that sufficient has been achieved.
Confirmation that all aircraft had returned safely came from the Ministry of Defence.
I'm pleased to be able to report that all our tornadoes from the first wave of attacks have safely returned to base, having attacked their targets.
In the squadron's home base of Lossiemouth, the pilots' wives have been preparing themselves for news.
The first I heard about it was when I watched news at 10. And
Zoe Barnes' husband is a wing commander with the squadron.
You don't sort of burst into the tears at a drop of a hat, because it's the last thing they need to hear is you being upset or emotional. They know you're going to be worried about them. Common sense dictates that.
Today's mission may only be the first of many by the tornadoes in an air campaign which is expected to last 3 or 4 days. Kevin Dunn, News at 10 at the Ministry of Defence.
In Washington, Congress, as always, rallied behind America's armed forces. But the timing of the military action remained under suspicion. Today was the day when the House of Representatives was to have debated President Clinton's impeachment. His reprieve could be very short. It now looks as if the debate and the vote will take place tomorrow and the day after. Our Washington correspondent James Mates reports.
Rarely can a White House ever have been caught in the grip of two such serious crises. A commander-in-chief ordering young men and women to war at the very moment he faces near certain impeachment. President Clinton must deal with both, but with all the vehemence he could muster. He insists they are separate.
What do you say to those critics? That it's not true, that what I did was the right thing for the country. I don't think any serious person would believe that any president would do such a thing.
This is now a city with a dual personality. In the White House, in the Pentagon, somber assessments of battle thousands of miles away.
And where you see, in this case, this building right here, you'll notice down here, there's nothing left but rubble.
Just a mile from there, thousands had gathered to protest, not against the military involvement in Iraq, but against the imminent impeachment of the military's commander-in-chief. To the disgust of the Democrats, the impeachment debate will start tomorrow while US forces are still in action.
What will the Russians think? What will the Chinese think? What will the French think? What will the British think? What will anybody think? This is wrong, and it should not be happening tomorrow.
The House of Representatives met in the morning to express its support for the troops.
We are all unified in support of our servicemen and women.
In the afternoon, to schedule tomorrow's impeachment debate. Many Republicans are so angry at the president, they simply don't believe the timing is a coincidence.
It is obvious that he is doing it for political reasons, and I and others are outraged.
We don't even trust him when he orders the American military into action. We believe he's a shameless liar, and it's time for him to step down.
So tomorrow, the world will be treated to the extraordinary sight of the United States at war, at the same time as it's debating removing its president from office. The vote is scheduled for Saturday. President Clinton could be impeached before the bombs stop falling. James Mates, News at 10, Washington.
So what's the strategic thinking behind these bomb and missile attacks on Iraq? Where and when will they end? And can they achieve what the United States and Britain want them to achieve? Our Foreign Affairs editor Robert Moore reports.
These were among the very first cruise missiles to be launched on Iraqi targets. Fired late last night from warships in the Gulf and filmed by the US Navy. With nearly 300 in the first wave alone, it is now abundantly clear this is no punishment strike, but a sustained assault on Iraq's military capabilities. And now large numbers of strike aircraft are flying combat missions from both the deck of the USS Enterprise and from airfields. A broader strategic aim is also emerging, for the targets chosen are clearly designed to hit the military infrastructure and elite troops that keep Saddam Hussein in power.
The Phase 1 attack was irreversible once the